Becky, welcome.
Hi,
Welcome to the show.
thank you so much for having me here.
Okay, everybody, this is Becky Weiss, Senior Principal Software Engineer on Amazon S3. And Becky is one of our foremost security experts. She knows security in and out. And in fact, I'm telling you, mark her name, mark it well. She's given one of the best talks on AWS security. I'm going to link that in chat right now. This is from our Reinforce conference that we ran a few years ago. But this video has it all. Nick and I, we learned a lot from you, Becky, and we're just so glad to have you on the show and that we have some of your time to kind of ask you questions for leading into Pi Week Day 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and as we can see on the schedule, there's a number of topics lined up. As if volunteering to give 2 of those talks wasn't enough, we roped you in here for a little bit of a fireside chat for a warm up. So thank you so much for joining us. Again, a quick call out to Twitch chat. If you have any questions for Becky or follow ups, any of the questions we're asking, we'd love to hear them and get them asked. So please get those in. But I figured we could start it pretty broad here. Becky, you have worked with so many AWS customers with trying to ensure security of their data. What are you hearing from them about the priorities in this journey to securing their data?
Well, the first thing you have to understand about AWS customers, and my colleague Eric Brandwein kind of touched on this in the interview that you just heard. The term AWS customer encompasses an incredibly wide spectrum of different kinds of reasons to be using AWS. There's everybody from the person who's just starting out, wanting to try out an idea, wanting to build their cloud skills or work on a project at school, everybody all the way up to the enterprises in every industry vertical, building absolutely entrusting us with absolutely their most critical workloads and data, and everybody in between. And even if you are a particular person on that spectrum, you could be occupying several places on that spectrum at once. I know that I personally have occupied every part of this spectrum. So when we think about what their priorities are, it really depends on where you are. Over on the getting started at AWS spectrum, end of the spectrum, you have those customers who, obviously they want to secure the data and workloads they're putting in the cloud. And you want to make that very straightforward. You want to help them fall internally. We use this term. We want to help them fall into the pit of success. All of the defaults just get you towards a successful security, even without necessarily being a full expert in all of the concepts. And that's why, things like when you create an S3 bucket, if you don't configure any sharing of the data is not shared. It exists only within your account and only authenticated and authorized access within the account. We also offer features like block public access, which is something we're going to demo later today. It's one of our favorite controls because it's really that simple. It does exactly what I just said. It blocks public access in a very kind of straightforward way that everybody should just turn on. Then you move all the way to the other end of the spectrum. And I talk to these enterprise customers of ours, and I'll talk about this a little bit in my next segment, but what they're trying to do is they're simultaneously trying to create a really coarse-grained perimeter. What's inside stays inside, what's outside stays outside, and any exceptions to that are really kind of very deliberate and highly visible. But by default, they want their own developers falling into the pit of success. They're inside, their inside's perimeter. But at the same time, they have these gigantic data lakes on AWS using all kinds of analytics services to get ever better and deeper insights into their data. And if you have large piles of data, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to have some kind of finer grained access scheme you want to put in place as well. And so these priorities in S3 in particular, and actually AWS in general, is you have these very sophisticated customers thinking about their security on 2 levels: the coarse-grained perimeter, and then very powerful fine-grained access within that.
Becky, I love that analogy, the pit of success, just that term and the images that it brings to mind. I like to imagine that the pit of success is filled with compliance vipers.
That's a great image.
Yeah,
Okay, so I think you bring up a really good point, right? Security kind of means a lot of different people to a lot of different individuals, organizations that are kind of, moving along in their journey. But as you look at customers at these different phases of the cloud journey, what are some of the common themes that you detect in terms of challenges that they face?
Some of the, really, regardless of what kind of customer it is, the themes that we hear from them is they want to get the right answer, and they want to know they got the right answer. And a lot of our efforts are directed exactly towards that. I think it was that kind of thinking that led us to launch a feature like Block Public Access in 2018. They want to know that public access is blocked. Okay, so now they have a control across the entire account. Public access is blocked. And I feel like in this space, although it is definitely true today that all of the controls exist to be able to confidently and conclusively secure your data at any place you are on this cloud journey, I think there's always the opportunity to make this simpler for customers. And I think a lot of the things that you have seen us launch in the last couple of years are all sort of steps along that path. I'll give you an example. At the end of last year, we launched this feature. It is IAM, Identity and Access Management condition, called S3 Resource Account. Now, it didn't really seem like it's not a new service, it's not a new feature, but it is actually a big deal, right? Because particularly if you're running in AWS at scale, and you're trying to make some kind of a policy that says this identity, this network is only going to use buckets that are owned by this account, it's shorthand for all buckets owned by this account. That's a scalability play. That simplifies writing a very common sort of permission statement at scale. And these are the things this is actually what innovation means, to me personally, is that we listen very closely to what our customers are telling us they're trying to achieve, where they could use help scaling it, making it simpler, and we innovate on those things directly. And it doesn't always take the form of a brand new AWS service. Sometimes it takes the form of a new IAM condition that does that thing that we see people trying to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. From my interactions with customers, I'm going to make it really practical for how important the confidence is, right? And the validation of the assumptions. We say security is job zero here at Amazon and AWS, and security is immensely important at lots of other customer organizations. And oftentimes, until there's provability around that security, even if there's an idea that it could be secure, oftentimes that slows down innovation, and customers may not want to deploy new features as quickly until they can confirm their assumptions. And so exactly to your point, the IAM configuration could have been perfectly secure, but until there is another way to confirm that assumption, and I'm thinking here back to something like IAM Access Analyzer and
Right.
using formal logic to actually validate the assumptions of access separate from even how it would be implemented. And we got to hear from some of the team that worked on similar features over there yesterday. Sorry, my voice is going hoarse. But this is an example of how there's the tools to implement something correctly, but with any non-trivial system, especially to what Eric Brandwein was talking about, confirming your assumptions of how you've implemented that solution is very important and difficult. And that confirmation could be the blocker of accelerating your development velocity at your company. So features or even shorthand IAM policies, for example, go a really long way there.
Yeah, and all the way at the other end of the spectrum, you mentioned Access Analyzer. Actually, in the demo we're going to do a little bit later today, you'll actually get a few glimpses of this brand new integration that we have with Access Analyzer into the S3 console. As you're writing a policy for your bucket, the kind of policy that might share your data with either specific entities or more broadly, this is an automated reasoning powered tool that will take what you just wrote and kind of read it back to you in English. Say, you have granted access to these specific accounts, which is very helpful, particularly as you're at the beginning of that getting started journey, to have it confirmed to you that yes, I wrote this policy, I intended to do that, and look, the analysis of this policy is telling me that it is doing what I think it's doing, and that's a really good confidence builder.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a really good point. If I can play it back to you to make sure I understood it, in a way, it almost sounds like you're saying your infrastructure, as your workloads get more complicated, your infrastructure and the things that you need to do to secure that can get more complicated, but you can't secure what you can't understand, right? And so we have all these tools to kind of set, to the best of our ability, to separate incidental complexity versus essential complexity. And the closer we can get to essential complexity, the more success our customers have when securing the infrastructure.
I think that's a really good incidental versus essential complexity. I think that's a very good way to think about security controls, because it's that incidental complexity that we are going after here.
Yeah, and even something as small as kind of, what you mentioned is like, hey, our IAM policy is a little bit higher signal to noise ratio after this line, because we could do it before, right? But now we have a slightly more concise IAM policy. But think about that. Every single AWS customer interacts with IAM at some point or another, right? So this is a small change, like a 5% change that affects everybody, where the sum benefit is massive. So I love it.
Yeah, and in fact, for those of you watching this, one little secret here is IAM. The first time you encounter it, you're seeing a pile of JSON. It's a pile of statements. You're not quite sure, what it means until you look. But you know what? This isn't as hard as you might think it is. It is actually very straightforward. There are a couple of ground rules of the game, and these IAM statements, they basically are intended to match requests that you make. Requests you make to AWS, they get matched against these statements. Somebody's got to allow it. Nobody's got to deny. Those are the rules. It really literally works that way. And so investing in your own skills a little bit to bring yourself up to the level of where you do know how to read and write these kind of at a fundamental level, you'll be surprised at how powerful you can be in all aspects of using the cloud if you have that baseline knowledge. Because this is something that if you can demystify it for yourself, which doesn't actually take a lot of effort to learn these fundamentals. If you can demystify it for yourself, you're going to have a much better idea of what's going on in your cloud environment. So I think if you could spend time learning just one skill in AWS, I would say it's actually reading and writing IAM.
And to your point of making it takes investing the time to learn IAM as a tool. I'm going to give you a shameless plug here and say I have learned immensely and shared your talks from reInvent on this, because I think there is some significant amount of necessary complexity, but when you understand the way that IAM solves it, you really start to have an appreciation for the flexibility that it affords you without adding too much overhead. It's access control is a difficult problem, and getting it right without taking too many shortcuts that'll eventually bite you is a difficult problem. But some of your explanations and visualizations there have helped me, and I know many others. So I'm going to share that link in chat for folks to check out if they've been struggling with IAM.
Yeah, I mean, with that stuff, the whole is equal to the sum of the parts. I don't know if I'm doing it a service or disservice by saying it's kind of like high school physics, like you can break it down to its fundamental. I hope I didn't scare anybody off there. But what I mean there is there's a couple of simple rules, and it's an assembly of those rules. Like that is how this works. And so if you kind of go into it with that mindset, the whole is equal to the sum of the parts. Like you learn the rules, and that is what it does.
Wonderful. Well, Becky, we are very grateful to have you for such a long period of time today. You have 2 segments you're going to show us. You have a demo from what I've heard. And I'm sure that this is a question that Rob and I will probably lament over at the end of the day after everyone has gotten to speak. But if there are any really top of mind suggestions you would give to customers to improve their security posture on AWS, is there anything that comes to mind?
Okay, so to improve your security posture on AWS, I would say, I did a whole demo today for block public access for your S3 buckets if we're focusing on S3 specifically. And then the other thing I would say is, like, once again, invest a little bit in learning those fundamentals. Once you understand them, you'll see how this is done. You'll be less tempted to take shortcuts because it's quite straightforward to do things without the shortcuts. So I would say, like, if you individually are trying to improve your security posture in AWS, those are the two steps that I would take.
Do you have any specific resources, or is there sort of like a best way to approach this? Is it by watching these videos that we've been linking, or is there kind of a guided tutorial that customers can go through that you really recommend?
Okay, I got two recommendations here. So first of all, we have training resources. We have videos. There's in fact an AWS training site you can go to, start learning about security. But I suppose it depends on what your learning style is. My learning style is learning by doing. Build something in AWS. Build a service and try to get security perfect. You'll see it's fairly straightforward. It's not, and you will along the way, you will learn all the fundamentals of permissions, networking, of networking, of data encryption. You're going to learn these fundamental concepts. You'll learn them by doing, so they're really going to stick. The cool thing about the cloud is that anybody with a credit card can use the cloud. So there's the barrier to getting started, to trying things out, to learning by doing is almost non-existent. And so that is actually, when people ask me how to learn this stuff, that's my first recommendation. If you're a learner by doing, go build some things and try it out. See how it all works.
I was worried you were going to say open up a command prompt and start using curl and shooting commands at the AWS endpoints.
Well, I mean, I myself am a command line interface kind of person, but you can click around on the console too. Actually, a combination of both. If you want to really sort of see what's going on, you can both see the shape of the APIs and see kind of in the console how it's all truly hanging together.
Wonderful. Well, Becky, I know we could geek out over many things till the end of time here on the broadcast, but we do have a schedule that we need to get back to. Conveniently enough, you happen to be the speaker for the next session. What are the odds of that, right?
I know.
Awesome. Well, if I'm reading this correctly, we have a Pie with a PE, one of my favorite recurring series we've been running throughout this week, about securing S3 with guardrails and fine-grained access controls. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. Remember a few minutes ago, I talked about those two levels of security, the perimeter on the outside, and then the good fine-grained controls on the inside. I'm going to be talking about both of those levels and what we've been doing in S3, kind of over S3's history. I'm going to kind of give you in my opinion, sort of a best of. It's by no means a comprehensive list because that would take me much longer than half an hour to get through, but kind of a best of, like things we've done to really make it so that customers can get that perimeter right, and then within the perimeter can have a lot of fine-grained power over access to data.